Welcome to the 3D Cut Freak channel. Let's talk about how to make the inner structure for 3D printing a light and functional part, for example, for an airplane like the Piranha. The Piranha is an airplane I made within the last weeks for the 3D Lab Gang project of 3D Lab Print. You can download it now if you're interested and print it out yourself on your own 3D printer. But if you want to make your own model, maybe for the 3D Lab Gang project or for another page, I'm going to show you now how to make the inner structure. I assume you already know how to sculpt the surface model in Fusion 360. If you don't, you can take a look at one of my other videos here on YouTube. In this video, I'm only going to show you how to make the inner structure. Let's start with this part here. I created a very random surface in sculpting mode. Please don't ask me what it is. I have no idea. I just moved some points around to get this surface. Now the end result that we're going for looks like this. It's not only because of the color, you can already see it has some inner structure here, but you cannot really see it unless we make it transparent. So let's do that. Now that I changed the color to polycarbonate, you can see there are some ribs on the inside. And if you take a very close look, you can actually see that these ribs are at an offset to the outer surface. They don't touch the outer surface. Now, why do we have to do that? Well, if these ribs touch the outer surface, then in 3D printing, you would get a slot on the outer surface of your fuselage or your wing. And of course, you don't want a slot. You want an undisturbed outer surface, but some ribs on the inside to stiffen up the part. Let me show you what it would look like in Simplify 3D if these ribs would touch the outer surface. You can already see the slot here in the 3D model. When you slice it, the slicer would have no reason to close the gap, and there would still be a gap after printing, which you could see on the outside, which wouldn't look very nice. So we need to offset this rib, this rectangle, to the inside, and it has been found out that the optimal offset value of this rectangle is 0.65 millimeters. And here in Fusion 360, you can see that I created a part which is actually a solid part. It's not just the outer surface, it's a solid part. I can prove this by opening the cross section here. You can see that this is actually a full solid part, and these ribs are cut out, are hollow areas of this solid part, and the distance between the outer surface and the rib is exactly 0.65 millimeters. What is the end result in Simplify 3D with this correct model? This is what you would get from the 3D model with the 0.65 millimeter offset ribs. You would get a nice uniform undisturbed outer surface of your model, of your fuselage or your wing, and on the inside you would get a separate rectangle on each layer for the rib, but the rectangle which is separately printed is so close to the outer surface that these two melt to one piece, and you have an actual rib, which makes the part more durable. And that's the goal of the whole process. So finally, how do you do this in Fusion 360? Let's start to make the inner structure for this sculpted surface. We will need two offset surfaces. The first one has an offset of 0.65 millimeters to the inside, and the second one has an offset of 3 millimeters to the inside. Now we need to extend these surfaces long enough so they are longer than the outer surface. Let me show you what I mean. Let's extend this by 1 millimeter and extend this one by 2 millimeters. Let's see if this is enough. Not quite. So we extend it even further. And also the same thing on the other side. Let's extend this one by 1 millimeter. That should be enough. And the inner one by 4 millimeters. And now we need to make lids to close all of them up because we need 3 solids. How to close these sculpted surfaces? You simply click on Create Patch, select the outer edge and click on OK. Fusion 360 usually does a very good job in creating these caps, and you can do so for all 3 surfaces. Okay, the next step, we have to stitch these surfaces together so we have 3 solid bodies. Let's use the stitch command, use the original surface and the end caps we created for this one. These are the biggest ones. You see the green lines because it is actually possible for Fusion 360 to stitch these surfaces to one body. And this is now the original body. I usually call this the fuselage, the wing, or whatever part this will be in the end. Let's do the same thing with the offset surfaces and their caps. You simply select all 3 surfaces, and in the end you should see 2 green rings, one on each end. And we made a second one. This will be the body for the ribs, so I usually call this ribs 1. And the last one is the inner 3 millimeter offset surface. Let's also stitch this together with its caps, 2 green edges, so the stitching is okay. And as you can already see, we have a third body. Now this third body is only used for one feature, and that's a cutout of the rib body. How do you do this? You simply go to Modify, Combine. The target body is the ribs body, and the tool body is, in my case, it's the body 64. That's the inner body with the 3 millimeter offset. And the operation I'd like to use is called cut, because I want to cut it out. Now, when I hide the fuselage, you can actually see the end result of my ribs body. This is now on the outer surface, 0.65 millimeter offset of my fuselage, and on the inner surface, it's a 3 millimeter offset of the fuselage. So this is the body that will form the ribs later. My fuselage, I usually make transparent, but it's also a good idea to hide it until we're finished with the ribs, because all the next steps we're going to make on this ribs body. The ribs are sketched with a 3-point rectangle on this plane. I would like to make 45-degree ribs with an offset of 30 millimeters from left to right. So I start with a 3-point rectangle somewhere here, You will see in a second why I'm doing this. And let's see if we can, if 120 millimeters is long enough. We'll make this rectangle 1 millimeter wide for the moment. And I'm also going to make a little line here, because I want to dimension the angle to 45 degrees. Let's position this sketch for the first rib. The other ribs will be made with the pattern function. I want the first rib to be roughly somewhere here. We can always move or extend this rib later if the position is not good enough. This sketch will be extruded with a patch, symmetric by 50 millimeters. That should cover the whole width of this model. Now let's make a rectangular pattern of this body. The direction should be along this edge, and I'm usually going for 30 millimeter offset, not the extent but the spacing should be 30, and then we should end up with 5 ribs covering the whole model. Now you can clearly see that all ribs are long enough on both sides, and this is the reason why I made the first rib so long. I usually make these ribs very narrow. In this case, I would like to change the 1 millimeter dimension to 0.1. But of course, as it is a rectangular pattern, or any kind of pattern, this change of dimension will affect all other ribs as well. So you can change it later if you want to. And now we're going to slice up this body called ribs 1 with all these surfaces, and just keep the volume that's between the two 0.1 millimeter offset surfaces. If that doesn't make sense now, don't worry, just watch the next few clicks and it will make sense. I'm using the feature split body. The body to split, of course, is the body called ribs 1, and the splitting tool is the first surface. I usually do not use the feature extend splitting tool because I had some problems in the past. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. That is the only reason why I made these surfaces big enough so I do not have to use the feature extend splitting tool. This will create 2 bodies. The first body is the big one, but a short piece is cut off now, and it's cut off by the first one of the 2 surfaces, and it's this little piece. That little piece we don't need, so I'm usually going to hide it. The next step is to split the body again. Of course, this is the body to split, and the splitting tool is the second big surface of the first extruded rectangle. And this is why we need the 0.1 or 1 millimeter offset in the first sketch that you've seen before. Again, now that we deactivated the expand splitting tool option in the first split body feature, we don't have to do it again. Fusion 360 will remember this. With this second split, we created another body. Now we have the actual first rib, as you can see it here when I hide and unhide it, and we have the rest of the big body. So we don't need this first surface anymore. And what I'm doing next, you can already imagine, I'm just going to split all over again. And this is also the reason why I made this macro. So on the Y key, I have the split body feature. Select the body to split, select the splitting tool, click OK. Hide the body in between the two ribs. And split again. On the second surface, that's done. Split again. Third one, split again. Second side of the third rib. Split again. And the last split for the last and fifth rib. Only need to cut away this little piece that's not needed with the second side of the last rib. And what you end up with are 5 individual ribs, 5 individual bodies. Actually, we have 6 because the fuselage is still there. Now we need to combine the fuselage and the 5 ribs in order to cut out the volume for the ribs. So we end up with only 1 volume. That's the goal. So let's combine the fuselage and the 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the 5th one at the top. Ribs, and the operation, of course, is cut. And in the end, we only have 1 body left, and that's the fuselage. All the other features are temporary, are not needed anymore. So I'm usually removing these features when I'm done with the first set of ribs. Let's export this body as an STL and check in your slicer if everything is okay. In the next step, I'm going to create this second set of ribs with a different angle. But in order to do so, I need a copy of the ribs part. But now I cannot make a copy anymore because it's broken up into these separate ribs. But in Fusion 360, you can easily go back in the history of your model. There is the ribs body still intact, and in here I can make a copy and insert it into my model. Usually call this the ribs 2 body. Now you can see the feature of the copy paste body. I go back to the end of the model tree where all the first ribs are finished. Hide the fuselage and start all over with the ribs in a different angle, which you can do as often as you want, but I usually do one set in 45 degrees and a second set in 135 degrees. So let's do that. The second set of ribs is finished. I unhide the fuselage, which already has the cutouts of the first set of ribs, but it doesn't have the cutout of the second set. That doesn't matter at all. We just make another combine feature where we select the fuselage as the target body and all the ribs of the second set as the tool bodies. Should be 5. And the operation again is a cut. We end up with only one body that's needed. All the rest can be removed for a clean model tree. And this is it. Simply export as an STL and print. If you want to make sections of this fuselage, which you usually want to do, this one is short enough to print it in one piece, but if you want to make a section, you simply make an offset plane to the position where you want to make the cut and split the body, which is only one body, with the splitting tool of this new plane. And now we have the fuselage A and the fuselage B, which can be exported separately. Thank you very much, and please subscribe.